Let's learn how to make CRUD calls to a Spring Boot REST application using curl. To get started, we'll need an example application. Let's take a quick look at the code so we know what our data and endpoints will look like. Here we see a class called myEntity that we'll use for storing our data. It's a very simple class with a primary key and a single field called data. I use the Lombok library annotations to generate most of the code. At data, we'll create the toString equals hashcode method as well as getters, setters, and a required argument constructor. The noargs constructor annotation will create a default constructor, and allargs will create a constructor using all arguments. ID is of type long and is auto-generated. It's the primary key for each entry in our table. Using this simple class, we'll create a service layer that will access via a controller to allow us to create, read, update, and delete rows in our table of myEntity items. Now let's take a quick look at the controller. The default endpoint for our controller will be API/myEntities, as we'll see when we run our curl commands. We have access to our service layer using the auto-wired annotation, so Spring will supply it using dependency injection. First method is a read method that will return all the rows in our myEntity table. The getMapping annotation specifies that we'll use a GET request to access the data. Next is another getMapping call that allows us to read data as well. However, this time we supply an ID as a path variable when we make the call. This allows us to specify one myEntity item using the identifier. Next, we see the post mapping. This allows us to create an entry on our myEntity table. Since we'll be using post, our data will be supplied in the body of the request message that we send. The put mapping annotation is used for the update myEntity method. This allows us to change an existing entry. Here we specify the ID of the entity we want to change as a path variable, but we send our data in the body of the message we submit. And finally is the delete entry, annotated with the delete mapping. In this call, we simply send the ID of the item we'd like to delete as a path variable. And finally, we need some data for our myEntity table. Our data loader class is a configuration class that creates a bean which loads our table with data on startup. In our example, we'll load up a string array with characters from Seinfeld and add them as entries on our table. All right, let's start up our application and load some data. Our application loads, and we see each of the Seinfeld characters loaded as entries in our table, along with their unique ID. Now let's read some data with curl. From the command line, let's type in the curl command, followed by $X and the word get. This specifies we'll be making a get request. Then -- location and the URL of our server, localhost and port 80, which is the default in Spring, along with the default endpoint for our controller that we saw earlier, API/myEntities. And that's it. Let's hit enter to get our results. Because our endpoint does not use authentication, there's no need to specify a token or use basic auth and a set of credentials. Our result contains an array of JSON objects containing the ID and name of each character we loaded. Now let's specify just one of the characters. We want to get Seinfeld character number 5, so let's enter the same get command along with the URL, but this time we'll add a path variable of 5. In our result, we see the character number 5 is Newman. Now let's see if we can create a new entry. This time, we'll use -X and post since we'll be creating a new entry. The location and URL will be the same. We'll specify header with the -- header option and specify the content type we'll be submitting is application/JSON, meaning our data will be in the JSON format. And then we'll add -- data, and we'll carefully create a JSON object with just one property called data. Remember that the ID is generated in our myEntity class for us, so there's no need for us to supply it. Our inner set of quotes must be escaped with \. This is a Windows requirement. Running this command in Linux, we could use double quotes and single quotes to make this a bit more readable. For our data entry, we use the name of one of Jerry's many girlfriends, Mulva. In our response, we get back a JSON object with the new ID of 11 and the name Mulva, which was stored in our database table. We can then verify that by running the getAll command once again, and we see that Mulva is a new entry in the table. Later in the Mulva episode, we learn what her name really is, so let's create a command to update Mulva's name. After the -X parameter, we'll specify that we want to run a put command. For our location, we'll specify the path variable of 11, which is the ID we got back when Mulva was originally created. In our header content will specify that we'll be sending a JSON formatted data object once again. And for our data, we'll once again carefully wrap and escape the data and specify Mulva's real name, which we later found out in the show was Dolores. In our response, we see the entry was changed. Let's run the getAll command once again to confirm the data was changed. All right, looks good. Finally, let's delete one of the items from the list. We'll specify the delete command will be used, and we'll use the same URL along with the path variable of 5. And run the getAll command once again to see our favorite postman, Newman, has now been removed from the list. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching, and remember to always begin secure.